Hello and welcome to the Genius Podcast. I am your host, Karen Doyle, and I would like to invite you to join me and countless other Catholic women as we not only discover our own genius, but we own it, and then we bring it as a gift to the world and the people we do life with. The Genius Podcast is part of a much bigger initiative for Catholic women called the Genius Project. The Genius Project is dedicated to helping Catholic women discover their unique genius, what it is they are called to do with their gifts and their life. I hope and pray that you will come away inspired and, as St. Catherine of Siena said, set the world ablaze with your genius. I am so excited to bring you something really special this week. I am involved with Sisterhood, which is a national Catholic women's movement. We host Australia's main National Catholic Women's Conference, as well as support women to form Sisterhood Connect groups. These groups are made up of approximately 5 to 7 women who meet on a regular basis in someone's home, and they are a beautiful place of support, formation and prayer. This year we were 4 days off hosting our national conference when the world went into lockdown. This left so many women ready to be spiritually fed at the conference, but not able to attend the event. With the COVID shutdown, so many women expressed feeling really isolated, and they expressed a deep need for connection despite social distancing. So the Sisterhood movement set up virtual Sisterhood Connect groups for women right around the country. And we decided to do a book study on Fr Jacques Philippe's book, Searching for and Maintaining Inner Peace. Women met online once a fortnight and worked through the book. We produced a beautiful PDF journal for them to go deeper in their personal prayer time, as well as a podcast which unpacked each chapter. It is this podcast that I am so excited to share with you through the Genius Project. For 6 podcasts, I am joined by Therese Nichols, a female Catholic entrepreneur and founder of One Plate, as well as Sister Mary Helen, a Dominican sister of St. Cecilia, Nashville, Tennessee. These 2 women are incredibly special and have been a really important part of my journey. You will see and experience their beautiful heart through our conversation. We had such a blessed time recording these conversations, and we really hope and pray that they will be a blessing to you. It's so fantastic to have both of you on the podcast with me, and I'm really looking forward to our journey over the next 6 weeks as we unpack this beautiful book of Fr Jacques Philippe, Searching for and Maintaining Inner Peace. I just think it's just so full of so many nuggets of gold and wisdom and spiritual truth bombs. I know when I read it for the first time 6 years ago, I think I might have spent like an hour in adoration on one sentence, just meditating on one sentence. So I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have together, particularly today as we kick off. Well, I just think this is such a treat for me, and I'm really looking forward to unpacking this book with you both over the next few weeks. I know it's going to be a huge blessing for the women doing the virtual online Sisterhood Connect groups, but there's a little bit of me that's a bit selfish because I just love talking to both of you. So to have the opportunity to catch up and to talk about one of our favourite books is a real blessing. I know, Therese, you're a bit of a Fr Jacques Philippe junkie, aren't you?
Oh, yes. I love Fr Jacques Philippe's writings. I actually discovered Fr Jacques 6 or 7 years ago while I was on a sabbatical in Italy and France. And I ended up reading all of his books, but in particular, Searching for and Maintaining Peace really stood out for me. And I just find it this treasure chest of this amazing, amazing wisdom. And I think Fr Jacques Philippe has this extraordinary ability to be able to really open up for us these deep ancient truths and wisdom into the practical, into everyday modern examples, and bringing this ancient, beautiful wisdom to life for us to live. So it's been a blessing to be able to read his books over the years and to really be able to delve into Searching for and Maintaining Peace again.
I remember coming across it actually for the first time at a retreat that the Dominican sisters ran at Bowral. I think it was about 6 years ago. And I remember you gave a talk, sister, on interior freedom, and we'll unpack this as we journey together. But it was such a powerful talk, and it's always stayed with me. And from there, I read more of his books, and honestly, like you said, like there's so much power and truth contained in this little tiny book. I really encourage the women to carve out time and space, not read it on the fly, but to really sit with it. Because I know it's had so much power in my own life, and reading parts of it in adoration has just brought so much transformation.
So I find in this book that there's just so many spiritual truths, and we just have to, you read through them slowly and just sit with them, let them sink in. And then maybe later down the road, we have these truths in us ready for when the rubber hits the road, and we have that truth then to draw on.
I think, and a scripture, and one of the principles of life I love is you reap what you sow. And what you're saying, sister, is we can either sow a feast or a famine into our lives by what we choose to give our time to, what we choose to read. And I think we're really sowing a feast into our life when we are reading this book and storing it for when we need it. So I'm interested in what really resonated with you, because in this first episode, we're looking at points 1, 2, 3, and 4 of part 1 of his book. And I'm just wondering what resonated with each of you when you read this part.
Yeah, I think as a Dominican, you see the beginning as the most important. And the beginning of the book is, without me, you can do nothing. Mm. And I think that was really powerful.
Yeah.
Those lines of, without me, you can do nothing. But then at the same time, with him, everything is possible. So just that relationship between those two.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. I know. What about you, Therese? What resonated the most with you in this chapter?
Something that really resonated with me was when Fr Jacques Philippe is talking about the lake, when he asks us to consider the surface of the lake above which the sun's shining. And if the surface of the lake is peaceful and tranquil, the sun will be reflected in this lake. And the more peaceful the lake, the more perfectly the sun is reflected. But then he talks on the contrary, that if the surface of the lake is agitated, then the image of the sun can't be reflected in it. And he goes on to say that's like our soul in regards to in our relationship with God. And the more our soul is peaceful and tranquil, the more God is reflected in it, the more his image is expressed in us. And the more, in fact, that his grace acts through us. But if our soul's agitated and troubled, the grace of God is able to act only, but with so much more greater difficulty. And that really struck me. And I think for so many of us, all of us, we have these moments where the lake of our soul is agitated and up and down, and times where we're at peace and we can we can see God within our lives working. We can see and feel that grace, but others can see God within us and can see the grace of God flowing through us and that peace of our soul. And I think it's beautiful, because when our soul is at peace, we are able to have a deeper connection with God, but we're also able to bring peace to others, and we give permission to others to be at peace. We come into a room when our soul is at peace, and suddenly others in that room who might have been agitated, they too feel that peace, and it becomes this gift of peace that we bring to others through our own soul being at peace and still. And it's very much linked to that stillness, isn't it? Be still and know that I'm God. And we can have so much going on all around us, and crazy things happening, but if we can just be still in our soul and know that he is God, then we receive the peace from God, and we're able to give that peace to others.
I was just thinking, Therese, about what you were saying about bringing peace. And just what's coming to mind as you were speaking was all of the letters of the New Testament, and how many of them begin with, peace be with you. And how that's really remarkable that all of them, that's the standard greeting, the standard Christian greeting is peace. And the treasure that gift of Christ's peace is, that we want, that's what you want to bring into someone's home, So it just, that was just striking me as you were speaking.
Yeah, Absolutely. It's just, I think he also picks up on that the goal of the spiritual life is to discover in our souls the condition in which God can act in peace. And I really liked that there's an onus on us there to do some work, to discover the conditions. What is it that we can do? And like you said, Therese, I love that image as well of the lake reflecting the image of God, and like our souls, like the more our soul is peaceful, the more God's able to be reflected in us. I just think it's so powerful. But like, what can we do? These are great theories, and I often like to see how they can be lived out in the everyday, the day in, the day out of our lives, because the reality is we face some tough stuff. Like, life is not easy going. I think in my early 20s, I had this notion that, you would grow up, you go to university, you might travel, you get married, you have children, and then it's la-di-da, you're often sailing. And it's like you reach your 40s and you're like, life is just not like that. I don't know where that idea even came from. Probably Time Warner and Hollywood had a lot to do with that. But like, life is just full of these ups and downs. And I think we can often see those ups and downs as obstacles that prevent us from being happy or reaching fulfillment or finding peace, whatever it is. But I actually think, and he talks about this, that those obstacles are often an invitation, aren't they? Like, they're an invitation to trust. They're an invitation to be transformed more and more into his likeness. And I think that when we do face, I know that I try to apply this, not always perfectly, but I think my attitude when I face struggle or difficulty is, okay, how can I grow in this? How can God's image and his glory be revealed? What is he trying to teach me?
On that, without me, you can do nothing. He mentions at some often we have to get to that truth through experience. And it's something that sort of happened to me at the end of last year. Very ridiculous. Teaching is a very dangerous profession. So I was just walking into school and fell flat on my face and broke everything. No, I just broke my right knee and my ankle. Yep. So completely ridiculous. But so I went from being very capable of doing everything for myself to being able to do nothing, actually do nothing for a long time, months. And it was really interesting because it came straight out of nowhere. Immediately my question to the Lord is, wow, what are you up to? And he did give me quite a peace in the moment to just sort of be watching from outside what was going on, in a way of just sort of, wow, what is going on? What are you saying? And what was fascinating was I noticed, because I couldn't do what I normally did, I could see the barriers that in my normal life that I had put up to grace. So, and it sort of fell in two places. Like, one of all the things that I thought I had control of in my normal life, just being able to go and get things and do things and do things a certain way. And now I'm watching people around me do things in a way that I just wouldn't do them, so everyone's doing the things their way, and you're just like, okay, whatever, as long as it gets done.
Surrender.
Surrender. Yeah. So that was like one area of, I guess you'd put brackets around so many little tiny silly irrelevant things, but that I had control of. So that was interesting. And the other part was just the physical closeness of as a sister, we're not really physically close to people anyway, but there was a extra borders, and you could see, because everyone had to cross them, just opening that out of just accepting the care. You could see as well, like, wow, there's a whole avenue of grace. I think in both of those two places for me that I was like, wow, I had no idea that I was blocking grace. And I think when Jacques Philippe, he says in this line, I think it's on page 4, he says, how can I permit the grace of God to freely operate in my life? I think the experience of without him we can do nothing awoke, showed me where are the barriers to that.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, it's very humbling, isn't it? Like, we have to become so vulnerable to realize our powerlessness. Like, it's very humbling, sometimes humiliating to get to that point. And I know, sister, your accident happened, I think, a week after my husband Jonathan's accident happened. So you broke both your legs, he broke both of his arms. And similar to you, like, flip side of the coin, like, you had the experience of being on the receiving end of literally physically having nothing, and people having to step in to care for you. Whereas my experience as Jonathan's wife was, he shattered both his wrists when he rolled a bobcat down our very steep driveway and split his head open, and he didn't just break them, like completely obliterated both of them. And so he couldn't shower or wash or dress or do anything for himself for like 2 months. And so my experience was being the person who was giving that care, and also having to carry so much. Like, we have our own business, and it was the busiest time of the year. We have 3 children under 12, plus caring, not only doing the practical things for him, but running him to all of his appointments, and there were many. And the experience for me of being powerless in, like, whoa, this is so much to carry, but really praying for the grace. And, God just came through. I mean, there were so many people praying for us, but like, there was this abundance of grace, and it was such a beautiful gift to be able to love him. We've been married 19 years, but for me, there was such joy actually in that time of really being able to love him and care for him. So it's sort of, it's the experience of being the giver of the gift and then also receiving that gift, and that we, for both of those situations, really needing God's grace.
And seeing it so clearly.
Yes, absolutely. And realizing what's important in life. I think these experiences, really, like you said, awaken within us the truth of our lives. And I love that quote that he says I can't remember, early on in the book, we often have to experience. So we have to, unfortunately, there's no choice. But we often have to experience failures, trials, humiliations, permitted by God before this truth imposes itself on us. And I was really reflecting these past couple of weeks on that particular sentence, that we often have to, which implies they are necessary. They are permitted by God before the truth imposes on us. Now, I think that word imposes, to me, implies force. And so something that's forceful is actually not a nice thing normally. But it doesn't mean that it's not good for us in its situation. And I think, Jonathan has a great saying. He said, we either learn in life by a gentle word or a piece of 2x4, like a piece of timber hitting us over the head time and time again until we get the message. And I don't know about either of you, but so often I get frustrated because I find myself back in the same place. I find myself, going through a trial and learning and praying and receiving grace. And then, 6 months later, I might go through a different trial, but I'm back at square one trying to learn those same lessons again.
It seems like you're back in square one, but you're
does.
Really
No. Give us some spiritual wisdom, sister. I think he goes on to say that God would spare us if he could, all of these trials, but they are necessary in order that we should be convinced of our complete powerlessness. And he goes on to talk about Saint Therese of Lisieux, saying the best thing God could have done for her was to show her smallness. And I think these experiences that we all face, I mean, being over 40 and walking with so many different people, I've realized that all of us, every single one, no matter what age, stage, vocation, we all face trials. They just look a little bit different for different people.
And I think it's interesting, particularly the time that we're all living at the moment with COVID-19. Everybody is facing completely different trials. We're all experiencing a similar thing, but people are suffering in different ways, whether it's financial, work, homeschooling, whatever it might be. Everyone's got their particular trial, but it's being forced upon us. And it's interesting what you're saying, Karen, through these trials, sufferings, and failures, how it teaches us ultimately that we are powerless and that God is powerful and in control. And then suddenly that puts us in this place to receive. And without me, you can do nothing. I think that's, as we said, you mentioned before, that's the absolute key to acquire and maintain that peace, because we suddenly realize that our life is a total gift and we are completely dependent on God. But when we know that God is for us, that He's trustworthy, that we can depend on God and His great love for us, then we can be in that state of receptivity to receive His peace. And so that when we experience failures and sufferings and trials, knowing that God is powerful and in control, we can maintain that peace, and that peace that the world can't understand. And I think it's so interesting, particularly in this time. There's so many podcasts and YouTube clips coming out from self-help gurus all over the world of how to have peace during this time of COVID-19, and everyone is seeking this peace, and they're looking, whether it's meditation and yoga and all sorts of different things, but knowing that we can receive our peace from the true peace from God gives us that deeper peace, that no matter what comes our way, that we can remain deeply connected in that peace. And because the question is not, will we struggle? Will we suffer? Will we have trials in our life? Because we know the answer, of course. That's life. We're following in the footsteps of Christ. That our life until death, there will always be trials. There'll always be some sort of suffering. The question is, will we look to God in those times and cling to Him and know that He is all powerful and know that we can do nothing without Him? And so in a way, the daily practice of peace is actually the daily practice of accepting and surrendering to God.
Exactly. I think that disposition of openness is what allows us to experience God's grace and to experience things as gift. And so all those other things that we do that close off in any way from others, from God, from any closing hardens us against experiencing the goodness that God is,
Therese, you picked up on this idea around that we can have confidence in peace if we're leaning into Jesus. And we know that in Scripture it says that Christ, has won all these battles already for us. And another part of this chapter that Fr Jacques Philippe looks at is this idea that our lives are actually part of this huge cosmic battle for the soul. Many years ago, I read, I don't know whether you've read the books by Frank Peretti, Piercing the Darkness.
Yes,
and This
I
Present
love that.
Darkness. Yeah, I really recommend.
Just those first two. Yeah.
Yes. Well, they're so good because what they do is, for those people who haven't heard of him, he's telling the story of just people in their everyday life. So there's a media company and there's politicians and there's a family and there's all of this stuff happening on the earth between these people and their interactions, but he's simultaneously telling the story of what's happening in the spiritual realm between the angels and the demons for these people trying to win their souls for good or evil. I really love this novel by Frank Peretti because what it does is it elevates our perspective from focusing on the everyday mess of our life or the struggle or whatever it is. And it elevates our gaze up towards heaven to see that our lives and everything that is happening in our lives is happening behind a much bigger backdrop and a bigger story. And this is what he talks about. He said the reality of the spiritual life is that it is a spiritual combat of war and a war that is without mercy. But Therese, like you were saying, we should have full confidence that Christ has already won this battle for us. It's a battle not against, human enemies, but it's against the evil and the cosmic forces that seek to derail us so that we don't experience, I guess, God's plan, that we don't reveal His image on this earth through our lives. And it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, I think as well in that battle, where I see it most often is probably we most experience it. I'm teaching teenagers all day, but the battle of our minds and our thinking And Jacques Philippe's very good because he talks about the peace being based on the word of Christ, who is the true one. And so if it's based on God's word, that's stable, it's rock, it's true. Like, so there's no reason ever to lose our peace. And I think that being able to give students or other people I'm working with the word of God that pierces through this battle that goes on in our minds, to take something true and just cut through the lie and feed our souls with the truth.
And he goes on to say, like you said, that the first goal of spiritual combat is not always to obtain a victory over the temptation or the weakness, but rather to learn to maintain our peace of heart in all circumstances. And I'm really interested in both of your perspectives on this, because like, it's a nice idea. Like, it's a nice idea. And yes, we need to practice it when we're overcoming negative thoughts and when we're dealing with children who won't sit down and do homeschooling or whatever, teenagers in the classroom, or business plans that aren't going accordingly. But how do you actually do this when you're faced with like real stuff, like really big stuff, like grief and trauma, death and cancer? Like, how do you maintain that peace in the midst of what is objectively tragic circumstances? Anyway.
Something that I've been really inspired by over these last few months, and I cannot stop thinking about it, but it's the lived inspiration and example of a couple who have gone through one of the most tragic things that I've heard of recently. And that couple is Leila and Danny Abdullah.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
Yeah, some of you might have heard of them. So this couple, they lost 3 of their children in an accident in February when a drunk driver killed their 3 children and another girl, their cousin. And seeing the lived example of this couple, the parents of these 3 children who died immediately at the scene, they're strong, faithful Catholics, but just seeing they're absolutely devastated and still grieving, but seeing their calmness and their incredible peace amidst this great suffering is extraordinary. And it's because of their rock solid faith. And no doubt that they are going through, like, they are carrying their cross. Like, I can't even imagine. It would be such a heavy cross. But I've seen some of their interviews, and they recently did an interview a couple of weeks ago on a Sunday night, and just seeing their faith through this and the way they have clung to prayer and the peace that comes through that is extraordinary. And I think it goes back to what we were saying before about we know how the story ends. We know that Christ has conquered the world. We know where we're heading towards. We know that heaven is the goal. And we know how it ends, that it is in heaven. And you can see this I can see this lived through in the life of Leila and Danny, in this sense of this great grief and suffering, yet at the same time there's this joy and peace because of their faith, and they know where they're heading. And there's a quote in Fr Jacques' book in this first section where he says, it is exactly this interior peace which permits him to fight, not with his own strength, which would be quickly exhausted, but with the strength of God. And I can just see through this lived example of this young couple who have lost 3 of their children, that through their reliance on the strength of God and through their deep prayer, they're able to overcome this spiritual combat where it would be easy for the devil to get in and crush them in their grief. Yet through holding on to their faith, it unlocks peace, which unlocks this joy that actually the world cannot understand from a worldly human point of view. It's hard for us to even comprehend. For me, like, it just, the foundation, it's prayer. It's holding on to that faith constantly.
Yeah,
absolutely. I was speaking to a priest who's good friends with that couple, and he was just saying that their ability to do that in the moment, in a tragic moment, has come from years of fidelity. Because in a second, in a tragic moment, you can't change who you are in the moment. You are who you are.
So true.
And then that investment that has been made, all the little daily yeses to God, yeses to grace, allow God to step in and lead in those big moments when you just surrender. So like it's all those little acts of faith in God is good, and there is nothing that can happen in my life that God cannot use for my salvation and the salvation of others. Like there is not, if we come to that belief in true faith that God ultimately is good, always good, then I can relax and know that there is a good in the middle of the most tragic thing.
Yeah.
But that comes in the little steps of every day.
Yes, it does.
I love that, Sister Mary Helen, because I see that over and over in the persecuted Christians, and especially the stories that have been coming out of the Middle East over the last few years of these Christians who are dying for their faith, that they just didn't suddenly declare Jesus as Lord and die in that moment. It was all the little moments of prayer, the thousands of rosaries, the thousands of holy hours in the years that went by previously that got them to that moment where they could stand and declare their faith in God. And for me, there's this quote that somebody said to me years ago that I absolutely love. It's a bit of a funny one, but I just love it. It's, you can't fatten a cow on market day.
Yes, true.
That's a good one.
I know. It's always stuck with me.
I love it.
At the end of the day, like, you can't just get a cow and suddenly fatten it on market day to sell that cow. It's the years, it's the days, the weeks, the hours that's gone into that cow ready to sell for market day. And it's like our souls that suddenly we can't just click our fingers. It's the thousands of hours of prayer and the things that are being offered up. And everybody's in different circumstances, in different seasons. Some people do have the opportunity to pray for hours every day, and some are in a season where they've got little ones where being able to sit down on the couch for 5 minutes a day is a victory. But it's offering our day as a whole prayer to God, and using those moments of even the moments of the suffering of not being able to pray as long as we want actually is a beautiful prayer within itself.
Yeah. There's one little reflection I had when I was sitting in bed for a couple of months, was I've got all this time, so much time. And I remember just thinking the value of seconds. And it sort of comes to play here because really important, incredibly important things happen in seconds where you don't have time to fatten the cow, right? But the preparation for them also happens in seconds. It's just this, it's the little yeses, the little opennesses to others, to God. Just that yes. I mean, I think, Our Lady, fiat, our Lord said the same thing, fiat. Every yes that happens in the little second of now prepares us for those momentous seconds that happen, when God knows.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I love that. It's so beautiful. And I think that is a really good challenge to put out there to all of the women listening to this for this coming week. I like to give people something to go home with, to do, to put into practice, something that's really practical. And I think that's it, sister. It's just that challenge. So, how will we say yes in the little ways this week? Yes to the Lord, yes to my smallness, yes to his grace, yes to my powerlessness, yes to his peace, yes to having confidence in the fact that he's already won this battle for us, but just to say yes. And I think it's really encourage women to just be very intentional. Like you said, I like the word little yeses, the little yeses that we need to make. And I think that's, it's really beautiful. I hope and pray that conversation was a real blessing to you. And I really encourage you to take some time before the Blessed Sacrament and allow the truths contained in this little book to really penetrate your heart and your soul. If you are interested in a copy of the PDF journal for each episode, head on over to the Genius Project, www.geniusproject.co, and fill out the form on the podcast page. Don't forget your challenge of the week, and until next week, God bless you and have a beautiful week.